Afternoon, Minister. In response to your expressed concerns regarding the current adoption process, we have undertaken the task of preparing a comprehensive presentation for your review. This presentation will encompass a detailed overview of the existing adoption framework, a critique of its various shortcomings, and potential solutions to address these challenges. To further illustrate our proposed solutions, we will present two real-life scenarios, first demonstrating how the current regime functions in practice, and then applying our proposed reforms to these same scenarios to show how solution could improve outcomes. The slides will communicate the more lengthy legislation details while we discuss the overview of these ideas.
Current adoption regime sets out adoption as a process by which a child's legal relationship with birth parents is replaced by one with adoptive parents. In New Zealand, this process is governed by the Adoption Act 1955. Sections 3 to 4 of the Adoption Act sets out who may adopt as per the slide.
Prospective adoptive parents in New Zealand begin the process by contacting Iringi Tamariki OT Ministry for Children and attending information sessions that detail the adoption process, including legal and social considerations.
The Māori perspective on adoption in New Zealand is deeply rooted in their cultural values and kinship principles, which emphasise collective responsibility and the welfare of the whānau. Traditionally, the concept of adoption among Māori differs significantly from Western legal frameworks. The practice known as whāngai involves placing a child with relatives or close family friends, ensuring that the child maintains strong connections with both their biological and adoptive families. This approach prioritises the continuity of whakapapa and mana, which are fundamental to identity and social cohesion within Māori communities. Unlike often closed and formalised procedures of Western adoption systems, whāngai arrangements are typically open and fluid, reflecting a communal ethos where raising children is seen as a shared duty. Thus, for the Māori, maintaining these traditions is not only about preserving cultural heritage, but also about fostering resilience and unity within their communities amidst evolving societal norms. Principles like manaakitanga and kaitiakitanga, advocating for communal guardianship roles where iwi have participatory rights, align adoptive arrangements with both the child's best interests and cultural fidelity.
One of the key critiques of the Adoption Act is that it is widely considered outdated. It has not kept pace with societal changes, particularly in terms of recognising the diversity of family structures in modern New Zealand. Importantly, there are concerns that the current system does not always prioritise the best interests of the child. A significant issue that this submission will focus on is the lack of clear legal guidance on surrogacy, which is not explicitly addressed in the Adoption Act. Surrogacy arrangements often leave intended parents in legal limbo, as the birth mother is considered the legal parent until adoption is finalised. This can result in lengthy and emotionally taxing processes for all parties involved.
First Minister, on the slides we have provided some definitions as there are different types of surrogacy in New Zealand. Those two types are gestational surrogacy and traditional surrogacy.
In New Zealand, assisted reproductive technologies, ARTs, are regulated through a framework of legislation and oversight bodies.
Surrogacy has not been dealt with specifically in New Zealand legislation. Instead, several legislations deal with some issues that could arise from such arrangements, but no legislation or provision deals with all of the ethical, moral, and legal issues that concern surrogacy. The Human Assisted Reproductive Technology Act 2004, HART Act, is the primary legislation governing assisted reproductive technologies, ARTs, in New Zealand, detailing legal requirements for informed consent, surrogacy arrangements, and embryo research. The HART Act mandates clinics to follow rules protecting both patients and donors and is unique in specifically addressing surrogacy.
The Hart Act specifically addresses surrogacies in sections 13 and 15 of the Act, which governs the commercial supply and advertising of human embryos, sperm and ova, as seen on the slide here. The Adoption Act attempts to address surrogacy, but its outdated provisions render it problematic. Under Hart rules, the first birth certificate lists the birth mother and her partner as the parents. This will include same-sex partners, and it is irrespective of any genetic links. Then there must be affidavits required from the surrogate and the intended parents, which presents evidence of surrogacy arrangements, any plans for disclosing conception details to the child, any ECART counselling, legal advice, and the details of the home insemination. The court will assess all this evidence before making a final adoption order.
The blending of these three statutes is not ideal, and we assert that a surrogacy-specific legislation is needed, and the issue of surrogacy should be taken out of the Adoption Act altogether. All of these acts touch upon the necessity of keeping the children's best interest intact. However, it is not mandatory, nor is it a guiding principle. The legislation language used is the court shall be satisfied and not must be satisfied. The legislation is based around property and contractual principles. For example, Hart prohibits the sale and advertisement of embryos, and the Status of Children Act generally deals with parentage and equity principles, but not on family law principles, which would empower the family court to advocate for the best interests of the prospective child. Any reform must recognize that these children have rights, and those rights should be recognized by the court.
We submit that the new specific surrogacy legislation is urgently needed. Adoption is intended as an option for a child whose birth parents are unable to properly care for them. In contrast, surrogacy involves a birth mother who intentionally conceives a child with the predetermined purpose of transferring parental rights to the commissioning or intended parents. While both adoption and surrogacy are legitimate means of family formation, they are conceptually distinct and they require different policy responses. We recommend that a specific surrogacy legislation, which we have called the New Zealand Surrogacy Act, should include a purpose and/or guiding principles that the welfare and interest of the child be paramount when considering any surrogacy arrangement. As outlined here on the slide, the Act's primary objective is to prioritise the best interest of the child, ensuring that their rights are safeguarded from conception through to birth and beyond. The Act seeks to ensure that all surrogacy practices are conducted with the utmost respect for the rights and well-being of the child, the surrogate mother, and the intended parents.
Central to the Act is the requirement for a detailed surrogacy plan, which must be agreed upon by all parties involved and approved by a designated regulatory authority. All parties must agree on a specific timeframe for the surrogate to provide written consent to the transfer of legal parentage after the child's birth, not exceeding 14 days unless an alternative is approved by all parties and the regulatory authority.
The Act emphasises the importance of transparency and accountability, ensuring that all agreements are documented and all parties are fully informed.
This slide illustrates the legal framework of how the Act would work, and we will apply this legal framework to real-life scenarios.
The Act grants the Family Court exclusive jurisdiction to resolve any disputes that may arise during or after the surrogacy process. Our first real-life scenario includes a scenario that includes a traditional surrogacy using donor sperm and a surrogate's egg. It is a successful procedure, and Anne and Bill are the intended parents of a healthy baby boy. This slide sets out the current legislation which would apply, which includes navigating the combined legislative frameworks already mentioned to ensure that they are recognised as the legal parents of their baby. In summary, Anne and Bill must undergo a multi-step legal process to be recognised as the legal parents of their baby boy. This involves obtaining the surrogate mother's consent, applying for adoption through the family court, undergoing a home study, and potentially applying for parenting orders and guardianship under the Care of Children Act. Anne and Bill will achieve their goal of becoming legal parents of their baby through this current legal framework. However, the process is fraught with complexities and challenges.
New legislation would require Anne and Bill and the surrogate to develop a comprehensive and detailed surrogacy plan. This plan would include legal arrangements that outline the rights and responsibilities of each party, as this is a traditional surrogacy where the surrogate has a genetic link to the child. This would need to be explicitly discussed in the surrogacy plan and acknowledge the risk of consent being withdrawn by the surrogate to transfer legal parentage. This plan is a way to mitigate those risks. This plan would then need to be submitted to the regulatory body that has been empowered by the new Act. The authority would then review the plan and assess whether it can be approved, ensuring it meets all legal requirements under the Act and safeguards the interests of the child, the surrogate, and the intended parents. The authority could also order whether the plan needs amending before approval is given.
After the birth of the baby, the Surrogacy Act would govern the transference of legal parentage. As set out in this slide in detail, the court would consider the best interest of the child as a paramount concern in any decisions it makes. In summary, the new Surrogacy Act would provide a structured, legally sound pathway for Anne and Bill to become the legal parents of the child while ensuring that the surrogate's rights and the child's best interests are prioritised at every step.
Currently, the legislation states that although the unborn child is biologically related to them, they have no legal rights to the child. All legal rights are held by the surrogate, even though she has no biological connection to the child. Jessica and Simon will have to apply to legally adopt their own child, as discussed previously in Scenario 1.
Given the surrogate's withdrawal of consent, the family court would step in to resolve the issue. The court would review the surrogacy plan, the circumstances of the case, and all relevant evidence. Because Jessica and Simon are the biological parents of the child, the court would consider their genetic connection, the surrogate's reasons for withdrawing consent, and the overall welfare of the child. The new legislation would prioritise the child's best interests and would likely weigh heavily in the favour of the biological parents, especially since they were always intended to be the child's legal parents. The family court, guided by the new Surrogacy Act, would have the authority to issue a parentage order transferring legal parentage to Jessica and Simon despite the surrogate's withdrawal of consent. The court's decision would focus on what is best for the child, and to assess that can order that a lawyer for child be engaged and that further assessments be done by relevant bodies, i.e. OT. The Act is designed to prevent such disputes from causing long-term uncertainty or harm to the child, ensuring that the child's welfare is protected at every stage. If the court finds that Jessica and Simon are fit and proper parents and that the surrogacy arrangement was entered into in good faith, it would likely grant the parentage order in their favour. The surrogate's withdrawal of consent would not override the child's best interests or the clear intention of the surrogacy plan.